what's all this then? It's only episode 30 of Ask a Brit, volume 30. Must get that correct. Volume 30, they don't make them quite like they used to, do they? Although I hope that's not true. I think we get better and better as we go, right? Only you can be the judge of that. But of course, this is the series in which I ask you to ask me any question you like in the comments below using the hashtag #AskABrit. That way I can find your comment in the questions panel next week for volume 31. And this week we're going to get started with a question about the royal wedding that's been announced this last week. And Kath Rabiliard asks, have you any views on the royal wedding coming up? I haven't been invited yet. That's my first view. A bit rude, I think, on Harry's part, given that we only spoke a month ago. I'm kidding. I'm still trying to keep up this pretense that somehow I am friends with Harry when, in fact, he's blacklisted me. Obviously, I can relate quite heavily to an American-British relationship, not as ostentatious as this one, of course. I live in a 450 square foot apartment. She and he are going to live in some sort of castle, probably, and have a good life together. But it is good, you know, it brings in a lot of attention for England and all of that, and the UK in general, and tourist dollars, pounds, you know, so that's nice. And it's also a continuation of the relationship between Liam Neeson's son in Love Actually and that American girl, because they look like the young versions of them. Am I wrong? I don't think I am. So if I am, let me know in the comments below. So, you know, I welcome it. It was a bit disconcerting when the news first broke because I read it as Prince Harry to marry Angela Merkel. I misread the name. And that would probably be a constitutional crisis if the prince married the Chancellor of Germany. Although, you know, Germans have married into the royal family in the past. Prince Albert, hello. So it wouldn't be impossible. But she is a head of state, so it would probably be improbable. Can something be probably improbable? I don't know. Next question comes from French Architect. Is that your real name? It is. Weird. Did moving to America change your British accent in any way? It did a little bit. It did in the respect that I started saying words like for, as in the number 4, or go for a piss. It started making me say it more American because when I'd be on the phone to, you know, customers or whoever it might be, it was often hard for them to understand what I was saying because I was dropping that R, which is quite prevalent in American English, obviously. So I started saying for, you know, not quite as high pitched, you know. I said it more for humans, not dogs, and I think that that's part of what's changed. So I have adopted a sort of more rhotic approach to English since I moved here. Not all the time. I mean, I'm not egregious with it, I hope. And I still use words like egregious. So there is that. Next question comes from Firecracker3240, and Firecracker3240 asks, when dating an American, did you find any cultural differences that caused issues or roadblocks to people's reactions to you? Were there any instances where something you said was inadvertently taken the wrong way? And that question could also be asked, of course, of Prince Harry. And Prince Harry has joined us today. He hasn't. That would be amazing, but he doesn't come into houses as small as this, or at least he's not used to it. But if he was here, I would be asking him the same question, Firecracker3240, just to get some kind of corroboration between the two of us. No, there were certainly times when I think my dry British wit that is so often mentioned maybe went over the head of Tara, who wasn't ready for it yet. I'm not saying that she doesn't have a sense of humour, it's just that she comes from a country that employs perhaps a different sense of humour, and so my levels of sarcasm might have seemed like very harsh statements against her person, I think, but they weren't. I wasn't being mean, you know, not officially. I was being just sort of awkwardly British. There would just be times when it would just come out the wrong way, and I'd get into arguments over it, and we'd continue the arguments. Me still being sort of sarcastic and pretending that it's real, and her genuinely being angry and throwing me out of the house. So, but we got over that. After about 7 years, and I think we're good now. And she understands everything I say and the reason that I say it. That's probably a lie. Next question comes from Gabrielle Paulino, and Gabrielle asks, how do you pronounce Illinois? do you pronounce the last S or not? No, I don't. In fact, I learned very early on in my life, much before moving here, that S is in fact silent. And I've always dropped it. Same with Des Moines, and Boise, Idaho. I'm joking. It's Boise. Des Moines was another one. In two instances, in Des and in Moines. And, I have been very diligent about not pronouncing it that way. I have heard people, even in this state, though, pronounce it Illinois, which is interesting because it creates an extra noise instead of an extra noi. What's a noi? Nobody knows, especially me. Definitely Illinois, and hopefully that goes down well with people from here. Next question comes from Rosalind Parry. And Rosalind asks, how can I sponsor your trip? So you're traveling to all 50 states. Please fill me in. Well, Rosalind, we have a Patreon account that we are accepting donations to. We're almost at the $200 mark now, which is fantastic. That's $200 a month, which helps us to set up travel around the US. Obviously, that's not quite enough to get us to those far away places yet, but we're going to build up toward that. We're hoping to build up to better filming equipment, so I don't have to film everything on this, which is my phone. Which is what I've done thus far. We want a proper good camera for when we get out to those west places and see all those magnificent sights. But our Patreon account, for anybody that would like to help out, is patreon.com/lostinthepond. Our next goal, actually, is to reach $300. We're just over $100 away from that, and if we can get to 300, we can then start going to those states that are kind of outside of the Midwest, and that's part of our budget there. So all donations are welcome. You can, of course, do one-time donations through PayPal. Best place to check out all of this information is at my website, lostinthepond.com, and there is a little tab on there for donations. Okay, next question comes from Brooke Jonas. Can you do any more impressions along with Rick Steves? Well, I'm not certain that Rick Steves does impressions all that well. So, I see what you're saying. You mean I impersonate him. So, I have dabbled. I do a little bit of Alan Partridge, who is a radio presenter much like myself, and sometimes plugged down without having enough water. And other than that, some people think I sound like David Mitchell. I don't hear it myself. And so I try to steer clear of that one. And who's another one that they say I sound like? I don't know. Somebody said recently I sound like Chris Tarrant. I can't do him. Sometimes I do Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. And because he does a lot of that, stumbling through his sentences. And I do an incredible impersonation of John Quincy Adams. This is exactly how he talked. Nobody can disprove that, so that's great. Who's another one? There must be some way out of here, said the Joker to the thief. That's Bob Dylan. Who else? Cat. I can do an impersonation of my cat. If he was a human. Yeah. I don't have any food. So he's British now, and high British for that. No, I can impersonate a northern person from England. Well, Ringo Starr sometimes comes out when I'm doing videos. I don't know why. Do impersonation of a bus. That wasn't a bus. That was a sucking sound. An impersonation of a reservoir. It was poor. Okay, next question. Anna Addison, when you finally started working here in the States, what did you think of the pay periods compared to those in the UK? I know that most businesses there pay on a monthly basis, whereas here most pay on a bi-weekly basis. Thank you for that question, Anna, because I'd completely forgotten that was the case. I think the last job I had before I moved here paid me on a monthly basis, and, it's still the same amount of money that you'd get here over a month's period, except, as you say, it comes in one lump sum. And I think it was fairly straightforward to budget for that. But I think it is nicer to receive it incrementally, fortnightly, as we would say in the UK. I don't know. It's a tough one, because I think when you get that sort of big lump sum of money, at whatever period of the month you get it, it is very, very nice to see such a humongous amount of money. I mean, humongous as in relative terms, and think, wow, I'm suddenly rich. But then you realise, wow, also this has to last me until the end of time, or at least the end of the month, and then you spend it all in 4 days on alcohol, and you've got nothing left for the rest of the month. So yeah, I mean, it was certainly a different way of being. I'd be interested to know, to what extent is it still very prevalent in the UK to be paid on a monthly basis, and if that is still prevalent, is it tricky to maintain that ongoing budget? More tricky than it would be here. Some people here get paid on a weekly basis too. So there are different ways to do it, and I think that different people have different mindsets to this. And I know that I, in the past, have been a very instant gratification type person. So I think for me, the bi-weekly thing, the fortnightly thing, works best, I would say. So yeah, I'll stick with that. That's something that I think America does quite well. All right, the next question is two people asking a similar question here, Nora F and Linda Farrington. Nora firstly says, what do you think of QI? And also Linda wants to know if I've seen that show as well. And I love QI. The Stephen Fry years, magnificent, because Stephen is obviously a very intellectual fellow, and QI is a very intellectually based show, deeply intellectual in the sense that it touches on facts and figures that are very, very obscure, but makes comedy around it, so it's very accessible to anyone really, and I've always loved that. And I think that when he was replaced by Sandy Toksvig, it could have gone downhill, losing someone like Stephen Fry. But I think she's maintained this very engaging, presentational style, and the show is still a huge success in my eyes. So it's really good. And Linda also asks, about other shows such as Would I Lie to You, 8 out of 10 Cats, and on BBC 4 Extra Radio, The Unbelievable Truth, and Just a Minute, etc. Those are shows I'm not as familiar with content-wise, although a lot of people have pointed them out to me. But Linda also asks, are there any other shows that you'd suggest? Yes, Have I Got News for You is a great sort of satirical panel type show that has been going on in the UK for years. I mean, I was really high pitched again. 4 years. I'll keep it low. It's been going on for years, and is very topical. It's just a great sort of, look at the news from the week. I mean, you'd have to be up on your British news for it to, be as resonant as it is for people like me. You know how these shows such as QI have these captains of each team. They've had the same captains for nearly 30 years, it feels like. And it's just a great show. So I would definitely check that out. But like I said, get up on your English news. This week would be good because of the Prince Harry and Angela Merkel announcement, So check that out. Next question, Rena K. Okay, I know it can be cheesy, but being a songwriter, I love the competition of this. So do you miss the Eurovision Song Contest? I have to confess, Rena, I don't miss the Eurovision Song Contest. I was never really the biggest fan. It was very cheesy for me. However, I do have a story about this. A few years ago, I think it was 2008, I was a freelancer for Londonist, and at the time they gave me a beat down at an after-show party for the Eurovision Song Contest, in which I got to interview some of the leading contenders. In fact, the winner himself, and some of the runners-up. I was in this sort of bar area, this VIP area, and I was there, this inexperienced journalist, with my pen and paper, and the BBC was there, and all these other people, and they were jumping in front of me because they were experienced. So they were very hard-nosed and in there, and all that. But they all went off to the winner, so I started peering around and found the runner-up, and I went over to her, and she was, I think she was from like Slovenia or somewhere like that. I don't remember fully off the top of my head. And so I started asking her, how did you get involved with the Eurovision Song Contest? And she said, I've been in the music business now for about 3 years, and it all started kicking off when I met Mick Jagger. I bet it did. The dirty little... And it was interesting just to hear these sort of stories from the celebrity world, from these people. I also interviewed Cheryl Baker from Bucks Fizz, and she was lovely, as was the other members of Bucks Fizz. They were just there, I think, for moral support, really. Nothing else. She was trashed. It was brilliant. And it was a fun time. It was a fun night. But again... I was there as a pretender, as somebody that sort of didn't really have too much admiration for the Eurovision Song Contest. And the final question today comes from Smurfy, or is that S. Murphy? He or she is not a Smurf, but Smurfy, S. Murphy, asks, I always hear references to British TV channels like BBC One, BBC Two, etc. It makes it sound like you only have a few channels over there, but I find that hard to believe. What other channels do they have? Is there the same variety that we have here in the US on cable or satellite TV? Yes, there is now. Now, when I was a child in the 80s, we initially only had 3 channels. It started out as BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, and then Channel 4 was introduced, and that's sort of distinct from ITV and the BBC. Until, the late 80s / early 90s, I think it was the early 90s, we didn't have anything else. And then Sky Television, which is owned by that lovely man, Rupert Murdoch, came into being, and suddenly everybody had their satellite dish on the side of their house, I remember, and you ended up with 200 channels, most of them with Sky in the name. So it's Sky Sports, Sky Movies, Sky all these other things. And yeah, it's a lot like cable here in many ways, has become. I think back in the 90s, I'm not so sure about now, most people would have had Sky, but BBC and all that remain. Now, BBC has developed additional channels. You've got BBC 3, I think, and 4, and you've got CBeebies, that's for kids. It's still worth a watch, though, if you need a good laugh. Funnily enough, I did that one. A few months ago, I stumbled upon this documentary which was about Cristiano Ronaldo, the football, and I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing the history of him and where he grew up in Madeira and all that. And I put it on, and I was expecting this sort of really intellectual story about where he came from and all that, and it was dumbed down for children. It was CBeebies, and they were doing all this, you could be like Ronaldo too. And I thought, I am like Ronaldo, how dare you, patronising little. So I turned it off and watch some real football, which you can, because of Match of the Day. That's on BBC One. I'm getting sidetracked, but yeah, rest assured, if you were to move to the UK, you would have a lot of channels, too many channels. I miss the days of 4 channels, to be honest with you. In fact, if I had it my way, I'd make it just 3 channels, BBC One, BBC Two, and Channel 4. I don't like ITV. It's full of stupid shows sometimes, although Downton Abbey was one of those shows, I believe. And that's all we've got time for this week. Join me next week when we have volume 31, and I will, in fact, have a royal guest on the show for real. It's my cat. He's been made a monarch by me. But anyone who's interested, on my Twitter account at LostInThePondUS, I'm doing a little thing over the next few weeks leading into Christmas, where every day I post a tweet of an American Christmas tradition that I never experienced growing up in the UK. Hopefully you can more or less see that there on Twitter. And so it'd be great if you guys could follow me on Twitter so that you could take part in that and just, see those come through every day. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, where you can see pictures of me, the wife, and just some random people who were in my pictures without permission, and all that stuff. And you can also follow me on Facebook and go to my website, lostinthepond.com. And just to reiterate, of course, you can go to patreon.com/lostinthepond if you would like to help my beautiful, beautiful travel series. It's going to be more beautiful when we get the right equipment. Until next time, have a fabulous week and be good to each other.